Used cars get a pricey second life as the pandemic and microchip shortages drive up the price tags. 5 years after the region's big flood, we take you back and we ask, how much safer are your basements from flooding? A live look at our city there. More sunshine right now and clear skies tonight. And then we've got even more sun coming tomorrow. Nick Sirkovich will be here later in the program with a closer look at your weather forecast. Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Thanks for watching. If you're in the market for a used car, expect to pay more. Prices have shifted into overdrive as more drivers are buying trade-ins. Dale Molnar now on what's behind the spike in interest and prices.
When it comes to used cars, it's a seller's market. The sales manager at the Automax used car dealership on Tecumseh Road East is seeing it firsthand.
Our customer base has gone up, yes. We've started to see a lot more customers, probably, I would say, about a 10% increase.
The scarcity of new cars due to a microchip shortage has not only driven more people to the used car market, it's also driven up used car prices as well. A survey done by Autotrader.ca, an online website that carries classified ads for people buying and selling cars, revealed that 27% of people who used to only buy new cars are now willing to buy a used car.
In August 2019, before the pandemic, the average price for a used vehicle in Canada was $25,841. In August of 2021, the average price for a used vehicle jumped to $29,376. So from 2021 to 2019, that's a 14% increase.
Automotive journalist Kay Lane says the prices have jumped 25% in the last year. Besides the microchip shortage, Lane points to COVID-19 as another factor driving up the cost of used cars.
During COVID, with people not driving as much, they weren't turning in their vehicles and upgrading.
And she says the pandemic also led to more car purchases.
Those that decided that they didn't want to take the bus rush out earlier last year and bought up a bunch, especially in 2020, of used cars.
Dealerships are also finding it more difficult to find used cars to buy at auction, so they're finding ways to scrounge up vehicles any way they can.
We've beefed up our inventory as much as we can. We've been purchasing vehicles off the streets. Any customer or previous customer or friends of customers that had a vehicle that they're interested in getting rid of, they bring it to us for a free quote.
Dealerships are now paying top dollar to buy used vehicles from regular consumers. And so while that might seem like negative, it's actually a pretty good thing. If you're selling your vehicle, you can get a pretty high trade-in value right now.
The experts say with no end in sight to the microchip shortage, the demand for used cars is expected to remain high for the foreseeable future. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
A few hundred people were protesting outside of Windsor Regional Hospital's Met campus today. The unnamed group says some of them are vaccinated and unvaccinated healthcare workers. In a letter given to CBC, it says the reason for the protest is to push for medical autonomy when it comes to getting a COVID-19 vaccine. It goes on to say coercion is not consent and say they want to work, but dismissing staff for not being vaccinated isn't the answer. Last week, Windsor Regional Hospital suspended 147 workers without pay for refusing to get vaccinated. They have until next Thursday to either get the shot or face termination. Some of the people at today's protest held signs that said willing to work freely, medical freedom, and my body, my choice. The hospital released a statement today as well. It says, we stand by our Windsor Regional Hospital vaccine policy that was unanimously passed by our Medical Advisory Committee and Board of Directors. Patients and their loved ones expect us to do everything we can to prevent the spread and or outbreak of COVID-19 within our hospitals. 113 employees out of the 147 who were suspended remain unvaccinated. Folks in the restaurant and bar business are calling for an end to the midnight curfew that forces them to close their doors at 12 a.m. because of COVID-19. That's a rule specifically for Windsor-Essex, ordered by the health unit. With the vaccine passport now in effect, they say the rules are no longer necessary.
Now that we're only letting in vaccinated patrons because the Ontario government's mandating that, why do we still have to adhere to the letter of instruction recommendations or laws, those are all based off of pre-vaccination passport numbers.
It should be like, oh, right. These places all did these changes, these really difficult changes that are forcing their staff into extremely uncomfortable situations. So we're gonna give them this other thing that is totally logical to give back because they've made a healthy change in the space.
Both business owners say they're seeing a huge drop in business. Comsa says one of his locations has lost 90%. His hospitality group, which owns the Bull and Barrel, the Goat, and Wild Child Nightlife, has launched a petition. It has more than 1,400 signatures so far. And in addition to the curfew, Comsa wants the no dancing rule dropped as well. But Windsor's acting medical officer of health says case rates are still relatively high, so status quo remains.
Whatever public health measures we have to put in place, we have to consider what is the local context. And the data would suggest, and the historical experience would suggest, that Windsor, Essex is disproportionately affected by COVID-19.
The health unit adds that it will continue to evaluate the data and its policy. Meanwhile, COVID-19 cases are continuing a downward trend. 29 new cases were reported today and no new deaths. And Walpole Island First Nation is seeing a spike in COVID cases. Both the Children's Center and the day school have been shut down because of outbreaks there. An official says this is the worst the COVID-19 situation has been in the community to date.
What always concerns us as cases begin to rise is whether or not our health center has the capacity to continue to test, continue to complete contact tracing, and that is where we're seeing the health center being pushed to their limits. So that is why we're finding ourselves needing to take more extreme action within the First Nation to try to curb the spread of COVID-19. We're at the breaking point now, so I think that is part of the reason why we're more concerned, more so than the number of active cases or the fact that there's 2 outbreaks. It's the fact that we're having trouble keeping up with the contact tracing and the testing.
Right now, there are 28 active cases on the First Nation. Just a couple of weeks ago, there were none. Jenkins says there's a high vaccination rate on Walpole, so much of the transmission is happening by way of children. He says the First Nation is looking at staffing levels at the health center, and leaning towards more restrictive local regulations in the coming days. Environment Canada called it one of the worst natural disasters Canada experienced in 2016, a massive rainstorm that hit Windsor and Tecumseh. 5 years later, politicians say that storm reshaped how they approach storm infrastructure. But some people still find themselves with soggy basements after major storms. Our Chris Sensing reports.
A surge of stormwater, flood systems overwhelmed, retention ponds pushed to their limits. A big difference today, bright skies, dry boots. But 5 years ago, heavy rain fell fast, more than 175 millimeters falling over a 6-hour period. Over 24 hours, parts of Windsor and Tecumseh saw more rain than you'd get during a typical hurricane. The infrastructure was overwhelmed by this surge in water, and that flowed into people's basements. Thousands of people left cleaning up the mess. Sasha Stasko uses her basement as a rec room for her kids, but 24 hours after this photo, a nightmare.
I remember the whole basement flooding very fast, rescuing my kids from the basement.
2016 was bad. Thousands of insurance claims totaling more than $100 million. But flooding is a perennial problem for folks like Stasko, anxious whenever heavy rain is in the forecast.
Well, for somebody who has experienced flooding, it can't come quick enough.
This councillor's house has flooded before. The 2016 flood refocused priorities.
Our sewer systems in the whole city needed a complete revamping.
When everything is said and done, we're probably going to be $200 million. So it is top of mind now.
Tecumseh will spend millions to rebuild pumping stations like this one here, increasing capacity by 200 to 800%. This station blasts water from Windsor into the Detroit River.
And the reason we're here is not just the visual of the system working behind us,
But this infrastructure, this St. Paul pumping station, will be the beneficiary of an $8 million upgrade next year.
Both mayors want federal money flowing. Windsor spent more than $150 million in recent years.
We are shovel ready for the next decade. So if there's enough money that comes, we can keep moving projects through the pipeline.
Both Tecumseh and Windsor have applied 3 times for millions through a federal program. They've had 1 application in each approved. Tecumseh is firing off a 4th application. Windsor will also apply for a 4th time. Meanwhile, homeowners like Stasco dream of a day when forecasted storms doesn't mean another sleepless night.
Yeah, but big problem. Big flooding all over the property that's continuous every single time it rains.
Chris Hensing, CBC News, Windsor.
So much damage, displacement, and angst were caused by the flooding 5 years ago. Here are some of the sights and sounds from the so-called 1-in-100-year storm of 2016.
I honestly don't even know what to think. This is ridiculous. Swimming, anyone? Our rain's not supposed to stop until Tuesday, so it can only get worse.
This is crazy. When it's knee deep in the city of Windsor, who knows what's going to happen?
This storm today was beyond the 1-in-100-year storm. This wasn't even the 1-in-100-year storm. This was beyond that.
So I tried to save as much as I could over there, but between 9:30 and about 11:30, it went from this much water to about a foot.
It was a great place for the grandchildren and my children, and it's all under water.
It's a mess, and it's a lot of work.
And then when you go to apply for the protection that you've paid for, in my case 17 years, you find out you don't have it. And so, it's dispelling, and, there's going to be a lot of residents here that are going to be, up at arms with their insurance companies.
Digging into Windsor's past, a local researcher is looking for former residents of the McDougall Street corridor. She wants to document the Black history of the neighborhood. CBC's Jen LaGrassa has more.
It's an area rich with Windsor's Black history, yet few know much about it. The McDougall Street corridor spans from Goya Street to Highland Avenue in between Pitt Street East and Giles Boulevard. From the 1800s to mid-1900s, it was a predominantly Black neighborhood. According to researcher Willow Key, a redevelopment plan by the city of Windsor led to the community's dispersal. Now, she wants to remap what that area looked like.
There's a lot of unresolved emotion over this situation for members of the Black community. People really didn't get a say in what happened with the urban redevelopment plan. And so you had people who lost homes and businesses and really didn't have any agency in what happened.
Key wants to hear directly from the neighborhood's former residents. She's hoping to be able to pinpoint former businesses, schools, and churches. She says the area was a key settling point for many Black people who were enslaved in the United States.
It's a really unique aspect of Canadian history, especially here in southwestern Ontario. Windsor was really, in many ways, sort of the gateway to Canada, to opportunities, to freedom in many cases for men and women who were enslaved in the United States, or men and women who were considered free people of color.
And she's eager to hear the personal stories as her family has its own ties to the area. Interviews for the project We Were Here, Recovering the Stories of Windsor's McDougall Street corridor, are set to begin October 18th and run until April next year. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
Tomorrow marks the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and education is a big part of that. At the Windsor-Essex Catholic District School Board, they'd had an Indigenous education lead for the past 5 years, and that's to help embed Indigenous education into the curriculum for all students. Darlene Marshall, who is a member of Caldwell First Nation, says Indigenous education at the board has improved a lot, but there's still room for growth, and there are even ways parents can help at home as well.
There has been a growth of wanting to find out knowledge, wanting to know the true history, wanting to know the role of the Catholic Church in residential schools. So all those things have been on the forefront of people's minds and has really driven the amount of activity and questions and professional development that we've been going through as a school board. It's okay if you don't know. It's okay if you weren't taught this in school, because none of us were. It wasn't in our curriculum when we went to school, at least not when I went to school. I know I'm old, but it wasn't there. I never saw myself in the textbooks, right? And that's okay, but it's not okay to just leave it there. It's incumbent on all of us as Canadians to begin that learning journey and to say to your students, to your children, hey, I don't know much about that. Let's learn together. Let's go on this journey together.
A look at our riverfront there, just another gloriously sunny day. And if you haven't been outside yet, there's still some time before the sun sets. Nick Sirkovich, he'll be here right after the break to tell you how long the sunshine is here to stay. We'll be right back. Nick Sirkovich is here now for a look at our weather forecast. Nick, we've got perfect conditions and basically all week. Beautiful sun,
Yes.
clear skies, and like low 20s. It's been
I noticed you're dressed for the weather map there as well. You're echoing the colors that are that we're showing on our temperature map. We have warm temperatures right across southwestern Ontario. We've had temperatures in the 20s. Now, if you want the record breakers, you've got to go out toward Manitoba, but we can't complain. We've seen some pretty good weather here. There's a look at current temperatures across the region. Now, southwestern Ontario, and in particular Windsor, actually seeing the warmest of the weather, at least in southern Ontario. But this pattern is going to start to break down. Now, we're still going to see warm weather down in southwestern Ontario, but it sort of pulls out of the north there. So there's a closer look at some of the currents at this point. It has come with a lot of sunshine, and that stays in place at least for the next couple. Into the weekend, the pattern changes a bit, but for now, anyway, we're looking at generally clear skies. So high pressure in place. That's going to lead to some cooler overnight lows as well, which I'll show you in a moment here. But you notice the cloud cover remains out of the Windsor area, and this is the case here as we move through the next couple of days. So that takes us through tomorrow afternoon and then into Friday morning as well. And it's really not until Saturday where the pattern begins to break down and we begin to see some cloud cover rolling in across the region and a little bit in the way of rain showers as well. There's a look at overnight lows for tonight. We've got temperatures that are going to be in the single digits, again, cool and dry, but tomorrow back up to 21 degrees, at least in Windsor, and straight sunshine basically right across the board there. In the long-range forecast, actually gets even warmer, believe it or not. So here's how it plays out. 21 degrees for tomorrow. Again, lots in the way of sunshine. Friday, basically a sunny day as well. We've got temperatures sitting at 24 degrees. And then Saturday, Sunday, we've got a little bit of a change in the weather pattern. So as that high pressure begins to break down, we're going to see some showers pushing in sort of mid to late day Saturday, and then Saturday night into Sunday. Sunday, better chance of seeing some showers and slightly cooler temperatures into the beginning of next week. But at least for the next couple, we're still looking pretty good.
The next couple, we can soak that up, and it always seems to fall on that weekend when you want to get outside that the rain comes out. What's up with that?
Exactly.
Thanks for this, Nick.
Oh, you bet.
All right, when we come back, we've got a happy ending to the mining rescue situation near Sudbury, so we'll bring you that right after the break. The federal court has upheld a landmark order from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal involving First Nations children. It ordered Ottawa to pay what could amount to billions of dollars in compensation for underfunding the on-reserve child welfare system. The CBC's Travis Danraj has the story.
After 14 years of fighting, Cindy Blackstock says today, justice prevailed.
This was a complete win for kids. And now the question becomes, will the federal government finally put down its sword and stop fighting First Nations children and treat them equally?
Since her initial complaint in 2007, arguing 163,000 First Nations children received inequitable child welfare in the country, Blackstock has endured battle after battle. Ottawa attempting to overturn an order by the Human Rights Tribunal in 2019 to pay $40,000 to each child affected by the system in the past decade and a half. Late this afternoon, a federal court throwing out the government's appeals.
Children were separated from their families because the federal government was not providing even the same level of child welfare funding that other children who had not gone through the trauma residential schools received.
Indeed, debate over the issue and criticism of the government has intensified in recent weeks.
You can't take a knee one day if you're going to take Indigenous kids to court the next. That's not leadership.
Mr. Singh,
that's
you
not gonna
love
make
that
things better.
line about taking Indigenous kids to court. It's actually not true.
Stop taking children to court.
Indigenous writer Jay Simpson was in the child welfare system for 16 years. Mental scars remain. Simpson says it's time the government take a pause.
Tomorrow is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and I'm not seeing it. I don't believe in reconciliation because that meant reconciling of a relationship, and there was never a great relationship to begin with.
Indeed, on the eve of that new day of reflection, Cindy Blackstock is putting things into perspective. She says the court's decision is a victory, but there are many battles that still need to be won for Indigenous people in this country.
I think they deserve good health care, and they deserve to grow up with their families. And I'm not going to stop until at least I've done my part in making sure that that becomes a reality.
Travis Danraj, CBC News, Ottawa.
Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet says federal members of parliament should be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or stay home. Before the federal election was called, Parliament had been operating under a hybrid model with some MPs attending in person and others remotely. Blanchet says that model is not needed now.
It might have been necessary and legitimate as a way to proceed a few months or a year ago. But now we know that we can go on with the way this building is supposed to work, and we should not refrain from doing so because a few person don't believe that the vaccine works. This belongs to another century.
The National Advisory Committee on Immunization is now recommending COVID-19 booster doses for a very specific group of people: Canadian seniors living in long-term care homes and other congregate care settings. The rise of the more transmissible Delta variant is one reason they gave for offering more protection. One respirologist agrees with the decision but wants to leave it at that, for now at least.
On many different levels, it seems reasonable to give it to this group. I still haven't seen, with the case levels that we have through most of the country, I haven't seen the evidence that would push us to say we should give it more broadly, because it's not an unlimited resource, because there's such a need for this resource in other parts of the world.
Other reasons the committee gave for the decision include the amount of time that has passed since residents received their initial doses. They say older adults may have a less durable response compared to younger adults. Many long-term care residents also had their initial shots spaced out relatively short periods of time. Current evidence suggests longer intervals will result in a stronger immune response. And a successful rescue mission at a mine in northern Ontario. All miners trapped deep underground at the Totten mine near Sudbury are safely above ground. The last of the group of 39 reached the surface early this morning.
They came through the doors. It was hugs and kisses and a lot of happy tears.
All the miners made the harrowing climb out using a series of emergency ladders up to 1,200 meters in length. And with the help of a rescue crew, they became trapped about 1 kilometer underground on Sunday after a loose piece of equipment blocked the mine shaft. The workers hunkered down in refuge stations with access to food, water, and medicine before making their way out. And that is it for CBC Windsor News. Thanks so much for watching. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Have a good night.